Somewhere in human prehistory, someone wakes up to a morning with no guaranteed meal. There is no refrigerator, no market, no delivery app, no promise that food will appear. This person is not lost or confused about their surroundings. They know which trees fruit this time of year, and where water pools after rain. They can read footprints, and know which roots are worth digging for. They know which plants can make them sick, and how to store food for leaner days. But knowledge is not a guarantee. It cannot force a herd to appear on schedule, or make today's hunt succeed because yesterday's did. It cannot make a tree fruit early, or promise that no one gets hurt today. And yet, whether or not food is certain, the body still has work to do. There is still ground to cross, food to dig for, animals to track, and supplies to carry. This is the kind of strength the ancient world often demanded. Not every ancient person was stronger or healthier than someone alive today. The useful comparison is not bodybuilder muscle or professional athletic performance. It is resilience. The ability to keep moving, working, and recovering when tomorrow's meal is uncertain. They were not surviving on endless slabs of meat, and they were not following one perfect prehistoric diet. Today, we might get mildly annoyed when a coffee shop runs out of oat milk. For most of human history, the bigger question was simply whether enough energy would show up at all. So what did people in a world like this eat to keep their bodies running? Early hints already exist: roots, fruit, nuts, honey, fish, shellfish, meat, fat, and marrow. But here's the twist. No two ancient groups ate that list the same way. There was never one single ancient diet. Ancient humans is not one group of people who all ate the exact same way. Prehistoric communities lived along coastlines, inside forests, across grasslands, in mountains, and in deserts. Some lived in places with sharp, clearly divided wet and dry seasons each year. What people ate depended on which plants and animals existed nearby. And on the season, it depended on access to fresh water, since water shaped where groups could even settle. It depended on the tools a group had built or learned to make. It depended on knowledge passed down through generations, and on whether a hunt succeeded or failed. It depended on whether food could be preserved or stored, and on how tightly a group shared. A community near the coast might rely heavily on fish and shellfish. A community in a plant-rich environment might depend more on roots, fruit, and nuts. A community where plants were scarce might lean far more heavily on animal foods instead. Even the same community could eat very differently from one season to the next. Modern hunter-gatherer societies are sometimes used as a window into this kind of life. But they are not a perfect replica of every prehistoric group across every era. They offer some insight into adaptation, not a direct copy of the deep past. Here's the line to remember. The ancestral diet was never one fixed menu. It was the ability to change what you ate as the world around you kept changing. So if there was no shared meal plan, what did such different environments have in common? Let's start with the foods that almost never show up in a dramatic documentary scene. Roots and tubers often had to be dug out of hard ground with a simple sharpened stick. Wild tubers were usually small, tough, fibrous, and far less appealing than what we buy today. But they had one major advantage over almost everything else on the menu. A hunt can notice you coming. A tuber usually cannot. Wild fruit told a similar story in its own way. It tended to be smaller, less sweet, and packed with far more seeds than modern fruit. It could appear in huge quantities for a short window, then vanish for the rest of the year. Knowing which wild fruit was safe, and which could make you sick, was its own survival skill. Seeds and nuts could pack serious energy into a very small package, but that energy usually came locked behind a shell, a husk, or a tough coating. Cracking, peeling, and grinding them open took patient, unglamorous work. Leaves, stems, and other plant parts mattered too. Depending on the region and season, not every group used the same plants, and that variation is part of the point. Then there was honey, one of the most concentrated energy sources available in the wild. Getting it could mean climbing, reaching into tight spaces, and risking stings or a bad fall. It's a small, sticky example of a bigger trade-off: energy gained against effort and risk spent. Plant material generally survives far worse in the archaeological record than bone does. The fact that roots, fruit, and leaves show up less often in museum displays doesn't mean they mattered less. Movies love the drama of a big, dangerous hunt, but in prehistoric life, a familiar patch of wild tubers could quietly save a failed day. Some of the most valuable food sources were never the most exciting ones to look at, and some of the richest energy sources of all were tucked inside the bodies of animals instead. Animal foods came in more forms than most people probably imagine. There was the meat of hunted animals, along with fish, shellfish, and eggs taken from nests. In some environments, insects were a reliable food source. Birds and smaller animals filled in gaps that larger prey could not always cover. Then there was fat, organs, and one especially underrated part, bone marrow. Picture one scene for a moment. A bone, already stripped of the meat around it, sits on a flat stone. Someone lifts a heavier rock and brings it down hard, until the bone finally cracks. Inside is marrow, soft, fatty, and dense with energy that would otherwise stay locked away. For most animals, without the right tools, that bone is basically a sealed vault. For humans who figured out how to open it, it became an energy container waiting to be unlocked. Now, a quick and honest look at what these foods were doing inside the body. Carbohydrate-rich plant foods and honey could provide energy the body accessed relatively quickly. Fat packed far more energy into each gram, making it valuable when calories were difficult to obtain. Protein, whether from animals or plants, helped maintain and repair the body's tissue over time. Organs and a varied diet added micronutrients that no single food could provide alone. No single food group was doing all of this work by itself. It's tempting to say something simple, like fat made them strong or meat built the human brain. But the answer was always a team effort, not one hero ingredient. Energy-dense foods were likely an important piece of the picture. Not the whole picture. That picture also included plants, tools, fire, movement, and cooperation between people. Hunting large animals, in particular, came with major costs. It burned significant energy just to attempt, and it often failed outright. It could end in serious injury, even on the days it succeeded. Even a successful large animal hunt did not automatically become a meal. That meat still had to be processed, carried back, and shared before anyone truly benefited from it. So finding new food was only the first step of the challenge. The next step was turning it into something the body could use. Here's the paradox. An environment can be absolutely full of energy that humans cannot easily reach. That is, until the right tool changes what counts as usable food. A simple digging stick could pull a stubborn root free from hard-packed soil. A rock could crack open a nut that fingers alone could never break. A sharpened edge could cut through hide and muscle far faster than teeth or nails ever could. A heavier stone could split open a bone to reach the marrow hiding inside. Grinding tools could turn tough, fibrous ingredients into something the body could digest. Processing food was never limited to cooking it over an open fire. Sometimes it meant cutting, sometimes it meant pounding, sometimes it meant grinding, peeling, soaking, or simply drying something out in the sun. Often it meant combining several of these steps. Not every technique appeared in every place at the exact same time. Fire changed the equation again. It softened foods that would otherwise take enormous effort to chew. It reduced the time and energy spent chewing. It made the energy inside certain foods easier for the body to access. It expanded the range of ingredients worth eating. It also created something else, almost by accident, a natural gathering point for cooking and sharing. But let's be careful here. There was no dramatic day when fire was simply invented once and for all. Evidence for controlled fire use becomes clearer at different times in different places, not in one clean moment. Here's the idea to hold on to. Humans did not just search for food. They found ways to turn things that were barely edible into energy they could use. But even with sharpened tools and a working fire, food still didn't arrive on a fixed schedule. Some days, gathering or hunting went well, and there was plenty of food to go around. Other days, there was almost nothing worth finding at all. Certain seasons brought fruit or migrating animals in abundance. Other seasons made almost every food source harder to reach. Meals depended on opportunity, season, and location, not on any fixed schedule. It's tempting to romanticize this pattern with a convenient modern label. This wasn't natural intermittent fasting. It wasn't some kind of intentional metabolic optimization strategy. It definitely wasn't a deliberate lifestyle choice made for long-term health. They didn't skip breakfast because an app told them fasting was trendy. They skipped it because the food simply hadn't shown up yet. Humans can survive periods without food, but that does not make scarcity harmless or desirable. Tolerating hunger is not the same thing as benefiting from it. Prolonged food shortages could weaken the body and put people at serious risk. So here is the question. If food showed up this unpredictably, why didn't one bad day collapse an entire group? The answer was not really about one person's body at all. It was about the people standing right around them. Picture one person returning from a long day with nothing to show for it. Another person comes back carrying food they managed to find or catch. That night, both of them still eat. And tomorrow, those roles could reverse? Across prehistory, countless smaller versions of this pattern likely played out. One person might find honey, but come back without any meat at all. Someone injured might not be able to gather enough food on their own that day. Children could not gather enough food to support themselves. Older members could contribute deep knowledge of seasons, landscapes, plants, animals, and past shortages. Sharing spread risk across the group, and fed people who couldn't yet feed themselves. It let very different skills coexist, turning one person's private success into a group benefit. Think of a shared meal as an early form of insurance. Long before money or contracts existed, here's a simple way to think about what people sometimes call social technology. Technology doesn't always have to be a physical object you can hold in your hand. A shared social rule can solve a practical problem just as effectively as a physical tool can. Nobody could know in advance exactly who would find food tomorrow. So when someone had more than they immediately needed, they shared a portion of it. On a different day, that same person might be the one who needed help. Not every community shared food in the same way, and the past was not a flawless, equal society. The specific shape of sharing varied, but cooperation around food likely mattered enormously for survival. A young child cannot hunt an animal or dig up enough roots to survive alone. Children could survive only because other people continued bringing food back for them. Feeding someone who cannot yet feed themselves is its own quiet form of human strength. Human strength was never just about finding food alone. It was also about making sure no one had to survive entirely alone. Food and sharing were still only part of a much bigger system. The body also had to work to reach that energy in the first place. Food supplied the fuel and raw materials the body needed to function. Tools and fire made previously difficult energy sources far more accessible. Daily movement conditioned the body and put that fuel to use. Sharing made the food supply more stable across inevitable bad days. Think about everything physically tied to finding just one meal. Walking long distances across changing terrain, tracking animals by reading subtle signs left behind on the ground, digging into resistant soil with only basic hand tools, climbing trees or rocky slopes to reach fruit and honey, pounding, cutting, and carrying whatever was found, waiting for hours beside a trail, shoreline, trap, or fishing spot. And finally, the long walk back to camp or shelter. Ancestors often had to spend energy just to access more energy. Food was never separate from effort. Time, scale, risk, distance, and cooperation. Now here's the honest modern contrast. Without turning this into a lecture, today, energy-dense food can arrive at your door with almost no physical effort and very little chewing. The gap between feeling a craving and getting food has become remarkably short. This does not make technology, modern food, or modern people the villains. It simply means the relationship between effort and energy has changed faster than our biology has. Ancestors didn't just eat different things than we do today. Their whole relationship between body, effort, and food looked fundamentally different from ours. Human bodies evolved in environments where food was often seasonal, unpredictable, or costly to obtain. For many people in food-rich modern settings, those old mechanisms now operate in a very different context. None of this means the past was some kind of perfect from natural gym. Let's be honest about the parts that don't fit a heroic narrative. A bad season could leave an entire group short of food. Hunting brought danger, and injuries could be severe. Food itself could carry toxins, parasites, or dangerous pathogens. Children, older people, and anyone already injured were especially vulnerable in hard times. Not everyone always received enough food, even within the same community. That is the part heroic versions of the past often leave out. Ancestors were not resilient because they lived in a flawless world. They survived because they adapted inside a deeply imperfect one. We should also separate two very different ideas. Survival simply means staying alive and capable of reproducing successfully. Optimal health means something closer to today's ideal standard of well-being. Those two things are not the same. So the lesson from the past cannot simply be eat exactly like ancient humans did. There was never one ancient menu worth copying in the first place. Now picture someone standing in a modern supermarket aisle, surrounded by thousands of choices. They're not sure whether to avoid fat or carbohydrates, what natural really means, or if one perfect plan exists. Here's the paradox to end on. Ancestors had to become endlessly adaptable because they had so few choices, while we now need discernment because we have too many. Let's answer the title's question on 3 levels. Level 1. What did they actually eat? Roots, tubers, wild fruit, seeds, nuts, and honey, along with other edible plant parts. Eggs and insects in certain environments, fish and shellfish near coasts and rivers. Meat, fat, organs, and marrow whenever they were available, shifting by location, season, and timing. Level 2. Why did those foods help the body function? Fat-packed, dense energy. While carbohydrate-rich plants and honey could provide quicker fuel, protein helped maintain and repair the body's tissue, and a diverse diet added essential nutrients. Tools and cooking made much of that energy easier to access. Level 3. The answer underneath it all. The secret was never a single food sitting in the ground or on a branch. It was a system, flexibility, knowledge, tools, fire, movement, and shared meals. The food supplied the fuel, but the system turned that fuel into resilience. That doesn't mean eating like it's the Stone Age, skipping meals on purpose, or cutting out a food group. Do not search for one magic food in a past that never had one. Long before food became something we call a diet, it was how people kept each other alive. Ancient humans did not stay resilient because they stumbled onto one perfect menu. They survived by finding food, transforming it, and sharing it when someone else came home empty-handed. Picture that same person again, walking back into camp with nothing in their hands. Someone else is already there, offering a share of what they found instead. That night, both of them still eat, and tomorrow, it might easily be the other way around. Our greatest nutritional advantage was never one perfect food. It was always the ability to adapt and to survive together.